If it's Tuesday, President Trump hits battleground Pennsylvania, touting new investments in artificial intelligence as the White House and congressional Republicans look to drum up support for Trump's sweeping domestic agenda. Plus, the fight for the future of the Democratic Party playing out in Arizona and New York City, where voters are set to choose between younger candidates calling for generational change and those with more experience and name ID. And inside the renewed bipartisan push to pass an immigration reform bill that includes a path to temporary legal status for some undocumented immigrants. The House Republican leading the charge will join me in studio. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in Washington, and we begin in Pennsylvania, where President Trump is speaking at a summit on AI and energy as he seeks to tout a key provision in the sweeping legislation congressional Republicans delivered for him in a state that helped deliver him the White House. Here's a live look at that summit in Pittsburgh, where the president just formally announced a $90 billion investment in AI, along with the energy needed to power it.
Today's commitments are ensuring that the future is going to be designed, built, and made right here in Pennsylvania and right here in Pittsburgh, and I have to say right here in the United States of America.
The summit is one of the president's first opportunities to sell his so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, which was not viewed favorably, according to major polls, when it was signed into law on July 4th. A fact Democrats are hoping to capitalize on in next year's midterms as they focus on the bill's cuts to Medicaid and its benefits for wealthy households. And now Republicans are looking for new ways to sell the legislation to voters, with strategists telling NBC News they're advising lawmakers to rebrand the bill as the Trump working family tax cuts. It all comes as the Labor Department reported today that inflation ticked up to 2.7% in June, compared to 1 year earlier. The price increase is sparked by the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. The president is using those numbers to once again attack Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell as he demands the Fed boost the economy by cutting interest rates. The president also downplayed inflation concerns on his way to Pennsylvania.
Very slight. Essentially, they were exactly as anticipated, very low inflation. So what you should do is lower the rate. The Fed should lower the rate immediately. There was very little inflation, as you know. The numbers were very good, very much inside the margin. So we've had no inflation. All we have is we're making a fortune.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin joins me now from Pittsburgh, and also with me is NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Julie, I want to start with you. What's the purpose of today's summit?
Well, it's exactly as you laid out, Gabe. He's touting the $90 billion investment in Pennsylvania. Trump spending a large chunk on stage. You hear him still talking behind my shoulder. They are talking about this investment, blaming President Biden, something he likes to do in his administration, in what he called as killing coal in this state. Instead, of course, the focus for this event, Gabe, is all about artificial intelligence and energy. 60-plus business leaders are here. As I was walking through the hallway all day long, there are a lot of different inventions presented by all these different companies, especially when it comes to AI and how that could help take the U.S. into the future. They really want to make sure this state that is, of course, so critical politically, but also practically with all the industry in this state, is center stage, is front of stage in terms of the U.S. leading the way on AI and energy production here. It was also notable, of course, because this is McCormick, who's a freshman senator from this state, just won in November. It's one of his first big events since becoming senator. And so the fact that he was able to bring all this together, of course, a lot of attention on this, and all of the cabinet secretaries that are here as well with the president here, Gabe.
Yeah, and Julie, any coincidence that this is taking place in Pennsylvania? Just happens to be the most important battleground state, which Donald Trump won both in 2016 and 2024.
Absolutely no coincidence there. And even Trump, when he started talking, made that extremely clear. This is his third trip, by the way, Gabe, as I'm sure you know well, since he was inaugurated to this state, to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He campaigned really hard here in the final days of the 2024 election. So it is absolutely no coincidence that he is here. And by the way, touting parts of that mega bill that he just signed into law, specifically focused on those tax cuts, specifically focused on provisions that could help businesses that are here gathered today to hear from him. But we asked Governor Josh Shapiro, who was also here earlier today, excited about this investment, of course, in his state, what he thinks about the bill. Take a listen to what he said.
26,000 Pennsylvanians are going to lose their jobs in the energy sector. I mean, it's somewhat ironic that we're here talking about energy jobs, and the bill that the president presumably will be touting would gut 26,000 energy jobs.
Also notable, I think, is that the president is pointing out here that artificial intelligence puts such a demand on the power grid. He said here that artificial intelligence is going to cause the grid to need twice as more power in the future. So if you juxtapose that with Shapiro's comments there, two different visions of the same reality, which is something we see often. Two
very different visions. Julie, look, Republicans just delivered this huge legislative victory to President Trump by passing what he calls his one big beautiful bill. But now we have that new reporting that some Republicans may be seeking to rebrand that legislation. Why?
Yeah, they want to call it the Working Families Tax Cut. Look, there's a lot of provisions in this 1,000-page bill that are frankly unpopular, and it's why you don't hear Trump and you don't hear Republicans talking about them. But what you did see is something like a move from Senator Josh Hawley out of Missouri, who a couple hours ago actually released new legislation to try and cut back and change and undo some of the very provisions that were passed into law as part of this bill concerning Medicaid and some of the food stamp benefits and other social safety net programs that could be very damaging if Democrats play their cards right over the next 18 months, especially in swing states and in battleground states like this one in Pennsylvania. So that is something that Shapiro pointed out even when he was talking on a panel down the hall from me earlier today. This is going to be a tough thing for Republicans to get over, and it's why they're only focused on the provisions that poll well, like those tax cuts.
Julie Sirkin, live for us in Pittsburgh. Julie, thank you. I want to turn now to Brian Chung. And Brian, we've heard for years about how AI could take Americans' jobs. This summit, though, is focused on how it could create thousands of jobs. Explain how.
Yeah, well, the economic impact of artificial intelligence cannot be understated, not just for the energy implications that Julie just walked you through, but also for the workforce implications as well. In fact, a recent survey done globally estimates that about 40% of employers expect to reduce their workforce where work can be automated as a result of this artificial intelligence technology. Now, 11 million jobs, though, are expected to be created as a result of artificial intelligence. Think about all these new industries, all these new companies that are popping up that are fueling this type of hiring, but it could also be at risk of displacing 9 million jobs, aka forcing people out of old industries that might get outdated and replaced by artificial intelligence, and then forcing those jobs to move elsewhere. That's a big reason why not just policymakers, but even everyday people are wondering what could be the ripple effects of this artificial intelligence technology. There are real benefits, like, for example, curing cancer. But on the other side, there's also the worry that it could have a real threat to humanity, as the likes of Sam Altman and Elon Musk have warned themselves. So very much big pros and big cons to that technology.
Well, Brian, this comes on the same day that the Labor Department reported that inflation was heating up, although the president is trying to make the case that it was up only slightly. How much of a factor were tariffs in those price increases?
Yeah, well, economists have said that this inflation report that we got today, covering the month of June, was the first real inflation report where we started to see the impact of the tariffs. So I want to point out here, again, what we're talking about when we say 2.7%, that's how much prices rose between June of this year and June of last year. That is a tick up from what we saw in terms of inflation rates earlier this year, but lower than the 3% that we had seen at the end of last year. Now, when you unpack the specific categories, we've seen food inflation, energy prices are also going up, so are shelter costs, the cost of putting a roof over your head. These are monthly changes that we're looking at here. But here is where we have seen some of the questions over the impacts of the tariffs. You're not seeing it everywhere. You're not really seeing it in eggs, where prices are actually down compared to a few months ago. I know that's welcome news to a lot of people at the store. Milk prices are about the same. And to the president's point, gasoline prices are also down by about 30 cents per gallon. But here are the categories, Gabe, where we are starting to see some of the tariff impacts. These are monthly changes. 2% in 1 month alone, increases in appliances and toys, furniture, furniture and bedding rising by 0.4% as well, which caught the eye of a lot of analysts. These are categories that don't usually make these types of moves. That's the reason why it's likely due to the tariffs. How will this be impacted in the months to come? That's the open question from here.
Huge question right there. Now, Brian, I was just at the White House a short time ago, and President Trump once again called on the Fed to cut interest rates. So does today's inflation report make it more or less likely that the Fed will cut rates?
Yeah, it makes the Fed less likely to cut rates, full stop. And the reason why is because if the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rates, there's a worry among Fed policymakers that that would make inflation worse. So if this inflation report shows the rate of price increases going up, then they don't want to cut interest rates into that environment. So as the president is calling on the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, who he's applied quite a lot of pressure to in the last few weeks, asking the Fed to cut interest rates by 3%, that is simply not going to happen in an environment where the rate of inflation is rising, which very much puts the Fed chair at odds continually with the president, as we've seen.
Continually, the president keeps criticizing him, calling him too late Powell, as he likes to say. Now, Brian Chung, our business and data correspondent, thank you so much. And turning now to Russia and the fallout after President Trump threatened to impose, quote, very severe tariffs on countries doing business with Moscow if President Putin does not agree to a ceasefire deal within 50 days. A Kremlin spokesperson responded to those comments today, saying Russia takes the statement very seriously, but needs time to analyze what the president said. But it's not just economic pressure President Trump appears to be leveraging. According to a report by the Financial Times, citing people briefed on the discussions during a July 4th conversation, President Trump privately encouraged Ukraine to step up strikes deep inside Russian territory and even asked Ukrainian President Zelensky whether he could strike Moscow if the U.S. provided long-range weapons. Well, the White House is downplaying that conversation, telling me the president was simply asking a question, not encouraging any strikes. Here's what the president told me and other reporters when I asked about the issue earlier today.
Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
Are you on Ukraine's side now?
No, I'm on nobody's side. I'm on no.
Why?
I want to. You know what the side I'm on? Humanity's side.
Humanity's side. All right, joining me now from Moscow is NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons. Keir, we really appreciate your time inside Russia. Now, what's the response been in Moscow to the latest threat by President Trump? Is the Kremlin taking this 50-day deadline seriously?
Well, let's just imagine what it must be like inside the Kremlin, if you can possibly do that. Not easy, I know, but because it's been a roller coaster of messaging, roller coaster ride, really, hasn't it? That those comments you got, Gabe, from the president today, basically ruling out a potential strike on Moscow here, came, of course, as you mentioned, after that report in the Financial Times, citing two sources saying that he said to President Zelensky, could you target Moscow, where I am? Could you target St. Petersburg in Russia? Then the White House saying, well, he brought it up, but he wasn't suggesting more killing. And that will inevitably lead the Kremlin trying to figure out exactly what the White House's position is going to be, because, as you mentioned, he's also laid down this 50-day deadline. And people here in Russia, and this is, I think, really one of the most important reasons why we're here, people here in Russia, of course, also were hearing about all of this. And what we really got on the streets of Moscow here was a sense of defiance, feeling targeted, but also many said, telling us they'd like to see an end to the war. We spoke to an international relations student near the Kremlin. We met him near the Kremlin, and he told us how he was feeling. Take a listen.
Well, I think this move by Washington signals a change in the strategy of Washington, because we used to say that Trump and Putin had like kind of a friendship, but now clearly I think they don't.
Does it scare you, the idea of long-range weapons targeting Moscow, NATO weapons?
Well, of course it is an alarming news. It is an alarming news, I have to say that, because I live in Moscow and I've heard about the drones hits, and I actually seen the drones one time. And this long-range missiles step is, I think, yeah, it's alarming. It's alarming.
Do you think this will push the Kremlin to negotiate?
Honestly, maybe.
He just walked up to us and wanted to talk to us, Gabe. That happens here in Moscow surprisingly often, and people are able to speak English. Surreal, though, I have to tell you, to be here you're there in Washington talking to the president. Surreal on my side to be here in Moscow while we were talking about whether this city would be targeted by missiles. We should mention, shouldn't we, that Ukraine and its capital, Kyiv, has been bombarded for week after week by the Russians using drones, using missiles.
Keir Simmons, live for us in Moscow. Again, Keir, we really do appreciate your reporting. Fascinating conversation. And coming up, as the Trump administration ramps up its sweeping deportation agenda, my one-on-one interview with the Republican lawmaker leading a bipartisan push for immigration reform with a path to legal status for some undocumented immigrants. Plus, Walts on the Hill. President Trump's pick to be United Nations ambassador was on Capitol Hill today, facing questions about his role in the Signalgate controversy that leaked sensitive military plans. You're watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. And welcome back. As the Trump administration ramps up its mass deportation efforts, today a group of bipartisan lawmakers announced a bill that would provide legal status for some undocumented immigrants. The Dignity Act, sponsored by Florida Republican Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar and Texas Democratic Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, would allow undocumented immigrants who have been in the U.S. since before 2021 to apply for up to 7 years of legal status with work authorization, provided that they pay restitution and check in with DHS regularly. It also includes enhanced border security provisions and protections for Dreamers. At a press event today, Salazar was quick to point out that the bill does not include a pathway to citizenship, and she insisted the bill does not provide amnesty.
Remember that dignity is not amnesty. It does not have path to citizenship. We're not talking about becoming Americans. We are trying to just bring them out of the shadows and have them go work in peace, pay taxes, and come back home.
And joining me now is Florida Republican Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar here in studio. Congresswoman, we really appreciate your time on a significant day for you. Look, we have seen different immigration reform plans fail in Congress before. This Dignity Act, you put forward something similar back in 2023, I believe. What makes this attempt different?
Everything in life is timing, and everything in politics is timing, and this is the time for something like this. The border is secured. The BBB assures $150 billion for border security in the southern border. Now it's time to have a national conversation as to what are we going to do with those people who have been here for more than 5 years. They are needed in the economy. They don't have a criminal record, and they are needed. So dignity is the best solution, is not path to citizenship, is not amnesty. It only lets them stay, work, and pay taxes.
I thought it was interesting. I was hearing, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if they pay $7,000 over 7 years?
And 1% of their income or their salary over 7 years, we're talking about two pots of money. One, $50 billion are we going to give back to the Treasury, and the other one is $70 billion that we can use to re-educate or retrain American workers. It's a lot of money.
What makes you think, though, that the Trump administration will go for this?
Because Trump first of all, President Trump is a businessman. He's the construction guy. He said it, that the construction, hospitality, and agricultural are needed. He understands it. And this is the moment where now the border is sealed. And after the BBB, he has that ability. I said it in my speech. You know, he was the one who attacked Iran, and he said to China, don't stop eating our lunch. Trump dares to do things that other Republicans or Democrats in the White House have not dared. And I have all the faith in the world that he will take this up very soon.
Well, that may be the case. A lot of his supporters, though, and including some of his top aides, for example, Stephen Miller, the architect of his immigration policy, has been for years. My guess would be they would look at this and have some serious questions about it, because a lot of Trump voters, they voted for mass deportations.
Mass deportation of Tren de Aragua, mass deportation of the bad hombres, mass deportation of the illegal who are criminals. But Trump knows that those workers are needed, and we are ramping up the economy again.
But that is not what is currently happening. Just that. Yes, Tom Homan, the border czar, and I've spoken to him many times, he has said that the priority is undocumented immigrants with criminal records. But according to this administration, they believe that every immigrant who is here illegally is breaking the law. How do you respond to that?
And they have broken the law, but the thing is that someone gave them a job for the last decade because they were needed, because that person needed hands or workers that are still needed today. Trump is a very practical leader. Trump is a common sense guy. This is the perfect solution for a problem that is brewing and that it's looming and is going to create problems in the economy. Trump is the only elected official with J.D. Vance in the White House. He is the one who will make the decision.
He is the only elected official with J.D. Vance. However, Stephen Miller, again, he holds a lot of influence in this White House. He is the deputy chief of staff.
Oh, I have no doubt that that's the truth. But at the end, the one who makes the decisions at the White House is the president, and the president is a common sense leader. Besides, I told him he could be for immigration what Lincoln was for slavery and what Reagan was for communism. He'll take up the opportunity. I have no doubt.
Have you spoken to House Speaker Mike Johnson about this?
I have spoken with Johnson a lot, and we're just, and he knows about the bill. Johnson is a great, great leader. And now is when the race starts. We just filed for this bill today, and now it's the time when we're going to start bringing the support.
You are doing something that is unusual these days in Congress. This is a bipartisan bill. Veronica Escobar from Texas is partnering with you on that.
11 people on the 11 Republicans, 11 Democrats to start off with.
Okay. So, and I want to ask you about something. You have carved out a very interesting path here in the modern Republican Party. You're seen as a moderate. You're a Trump supporter. You have seemed to have disagreed with him on some aspects of immigration. And I want to understand your position here. Regarding temporary protected status, the Trump administration has revoked that. You criticized the Supreme Court for ruling for that to allowing that revocation to go forward. Was the Trump administration wrong to revoke temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of immigrants?
I think that those people fall into dignity. Once again, if you have been here for more than 5 years, TPS, I-220 for the Cubans. If you've been here, you do not have a criminal record, and you are needed in the economy. It's only intelligent on our part to not give you a path to citizenship, to allow you to stay, to pay taxes, to buy homes, to open bank accounts, and to consume and to be part of the economy. There's no way that we're going to be able to continue being the #1 economy in the world with the #1 military if we do not have hands in the economy, period. So this is the common sense approach. It's a national security. We will know then who's here. They'll come out and say, hey, this is Pepe Perez. Then, we'll know where they are and where they live. They will contribute to Social Security because we do have a big pothole there that we need to fill. And so, it's impossible to be deporting 10 million people. The American people will not allow that. So we just brought the solution, Solomonic solution.
You say that. However, there are many in the Trump administration, again, and I revert back to Stephen Miller, they do want to see 10 million or more. They argue there's more than 20 million undocumented immigrants in this country. They do want all of them. That's what, to them, mass deportation means.
There is one boss, Donald Trump.
He has campaigned on mass deportation.
Yeah, he campaigned on deporting the illegals who are criminals, and we all agree with that. They can leave the country.
So you say that this legislation, this bill, would be a solution for the problem of letting TPS expire. Or was it a mistake to let TPS expire?
I think that everything that TPS is part of dignity, and even if it expired with dignity, they can continue being legal citizens in the United States.
Right, but this bill has not passed. So I know it's difficult. I know it's tough because, politically you're in Florida. But you disagree with some parts of the Trump agenda when it comes to immigration.
Look, politics is the art of the possible. And we're still in the best country on earth. And I know the process is not as messy and it's not easy, and sometimes you don't agree on one thing, but it's still, every time I walk into the Capitol, I say, oh my God, if the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, the Venezuelans, the North Koreans, the Iranians were able to see and experience this magnificent system that we have, which is the American democracy. So we're here and enjoying it. And I'm sure we're going to bring solutions to the American people.
Great. And we do have some new numbers from Gallup last week that said that 78% of Americans, including nearly 60% of Republicans, they do favor a pathway to citizenship for immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. So why doesn't your bill offer that pathway? Is that an acknowledgement that in the Republican Party that cannot happen? Because I want a solution right away. I'm trying to bring a solution to the president that will solve the problem right away. Path to citizenship could be considered in another bill if that is what the White House wants, if that is what leadership in the GOP at the House of Representatives, in the House. It's just right now, let's do what's possible, what's fast, and what will keep those workers in place. And I have been to the border extensively on border. The Trump administration, as it said, it's been very successful in reducing illegal border crossings. We have seen footage of those ICE raids. There have been clashes with protesters. Some in communities across the country, whether it be Los Angeles and even Miami, have been very concerned about some of the tactics that ICE has done. Do you agree with all of the tactics that ICE has deployed in order to round up undocumented immigrants, including some who are collateral arrests who do not have criminal records? I don't think that we should be arresting those people who have been in the country more than 5 years, don't have a criminal record, are good for the economy, and they are needed in construction, hospitality, and agricultural. I know that there is a quota. I don't like a number. That's why I'm saying to President Trump, this is the Solomonic way, and you will be able to pass down in history as the guy who solved this 40-year problem called immigration. Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar. Maria Salazar. You can make it shorter and simpler. Maria Salazar, thank you. It's really really good to have you here. You're a guy from Miami, so you're from my district. As a fellow Miamian, we really appreciate it. My mother, of course, my pleasure to be here. Close to your district. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. To you. And after the break, if it's Tuesday, it is Election Day in battleground Arizona, where we're live in Tucson, spotlighting today's Democratic primary race, where a heated debate over age, experience, and generational change is taking center stage in the battle for an open House seat. You're watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. And welcome back. If it's Tuesday, someone's voting somewhere, and today that somewhere is Arizona's 7th congressional district, where a special primary election has Democrats grappling with questions that continue to divide the party, tied to age, experience, and ideology. The deep blue district, stretching from Phoenix to Tucson and down to the Mexican border, has been vacant since the death of longtime Congressman Raul Grijalva in March. And the front runner is his daughter, Adelita Grijalva, a progressive with 2 decades of experience in Tucson politics. But also vying for the seat is Deja Fox, a 25-year-old reproductive rights activist and social media influencer, along with Daniel Hernandez, a former state legislator who's running on a more moderate platform. So here we go. NBC News correspondent and Arizona native Vaughn Hilliard, my colleague, joins me now from Tucson. Vaughn, it is great to see you down there. Deja Fox is less than half the age of Adelita Grijalva. So how have these candidates been grappling with these questions of age and experience in this race?
Right. July Election Day is not a normal one, and yet this special election in so many ways is going to tell us a lot, not just about Southern Arizona, but nationally for the Democratic Party that is looking for their way forward. They're looking at a race that is a generational matchup here. It's not so much who's more progressive, Adelita Grijalva or Deja Fox. It's more so both of these candidates leaning into their age. And the hand of Deja Fox, it's making the case that at the age of 25, she first was introduced to politics when Donald Trump in 2015 started entering politics. And essentially, the better part of her life has been a byproduct of his administration and his political era. And so in a lot of ways, she says that, look, when she was living here in Tucson, she understands the consequences of decisions up on Capitol Hill when it comes to SNAP, to Medicaid, and to affordable housing. And I want to let you listen to my exchange with Deja Fox about age, as well as my asking Adelita Grijalva, who's the 54-year-old daughter of Raul Grijalva, why her age is beneficial, and to push back on Deja Fox's claim that she's in the best position to represent young people. Take a listen. You would, if you win, be the youngest current member of Congress. Why in the year of 2025 is this your moment for a 25-year-old to enter those halls?
The things they are debating in D.C., I have lived. Growing up working class, but the things they are debating for 2050, 2075, my generation will inherit. And we need a seat at the table.
Deja Fox has leaned in to the age dynamic in this race.
Yeah.
And she has said that one family should not own a congressional seat for so long. What do you say to that?
One family has not owned a congressional seat. My father was reelected 11 times because of his position and advocacy for this community. Period. Full stop. Just because you're a younger person does not mean you're more progressive or a better advocate for the needs of everyone in the community, including young people.
Now, if Deja Fox were to win this race, she would be the youngest woman member of Congress in history, and she would be the second Gen Zer to represent a congressional district in the halls of Congress, the second to Florida's Democrat Maxwell Frostgate.
Vaughn Hilliard, live for us in Arizona. Vaughn, thank you. And still to come, Andrew Cuomo is officially back in the race to be the next mayor of New York City, despite a bruising primary loss to a 33-year-old Democratic socialist. Steve Kornacki's at the big board breaking down what Cuomo's third-party bid means for November's general election. You're watching Meet the Press now. And welcome back. Turning now to a major development in the race for New York City mayor. Coming just 3 weeks after 33-year-old Democratic socialist Zohran Mamdani stunned his party with a convincing 13-point primary victory over former Governor Andrew Cuomo. But Cuomo is not backing down, announcing he'll stay in the race as an independent. In a video announcement, Cuomo took a clear shot at his opponent while leaning into the same issue that drove Mamdani's success: affordability.
Only 13% of New Yorkers voted in the June primary. The general election is in November, and I am in it to win it. My opponent, Mr. Mamdani, offers slick slogans, but no real solutions. We need a city with lower rent, safer streets, where buying your first home is once again possible, where childcare won't bankrupt you. That's the New York City we know. That's the one that is still possible.
The Mamdani campaign quickly responding to Cuomo's candidacy with a statement reading in part, "He's not fighting for you. He's running only to repair his soiled reputation and protect the billionaire Trump donors who fund his campaign. We beat Cuomo once. Together, we will beat him again." And there are now 5 candidates running in November. In addition to Mamdani, Cuomo will also face Republican Curtis Sliwa and 2 other independents, including embattled incumbent Mayor Eric Adams. And joining me now to break down the field's top candidates is national political reporter Steve Kornacki at the big board. Hey there, Steve. We have a crowded field. Everyone says they're staying in until November, but what are the candidates looking at to make that decision?
Yeah, Gabe. So it's interesting. You got here the 3 major, as you say, the 3 major general election opponents for Mamdani right now: Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, the current mayor, Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee. And this is what they're saying to each other: no, you drop out. Because here's the dynamic, basically, that each one of them is looking at. And there is a point of agreement between the 3 of them. And the point of agreement that Adams, Sliwa, and Cuomo all have is that Mamdani can be beaten, or that if he's going to be beaten, it would be by a united front of opposition behind one alternative, a one-on-one race. And they agree that if it's a splintered, fractured field, that's going to benefit Mamdani. Where they disagree is on who that one candidate should be, because they each look at each other and they say they're too weak. to beat Mamdani. So, for instance, Cuomo, who says, as you say, he's staying in the race. Now, Cuomo, what his opponents see, what Adams and Sliwa see when they look at him, is a candidate who just got beat by Mamdani in the Democratic primary after starting that race as the overwhelming favorite. They see somebody with the baggage of scandal, resigned as governor 4 years ago amidst controversy. They see somebody who's still unpopular with New York City voters. The most recent public poll on this had Cuomo's unfavorable rating at 47% with New York City voters. His favorable rating lower than that, just 41%. So if you're Adams and you're Sliwa and you're looking at Cuomo saying he's staying in this race, they're looking at him saying, hey, you had your shot at Mamdani. You proved you couldn't get it done. So then shift here from Cuomo to Eric Adams. What does a Cuomo, what does Sliwa see when they look at Eric Adams? They look at the incumbent mayor, somebody who got elected to this job 4 years ago, who says, hey, there's some stats last week showing violent crime coming down. He thinks he's got a record to run on. But if you're Cuomo and you're Sliwa, here's what you see. The most recent public poll, favorable, unfavorable for Adams, 68 unfavorable. His favorable just 19%. Remember the indictment on federal corruption charges, then the Trump DOJ saying they're dropping the case. Enormous political baggage for Eric Adams. So you're Sliwa, you're Cuomo, you're saying, well, that guy can't beat Mamdani. And then the action shifts over here to Curtis Sliwa. Now, Curtis Sliwa is a familiar figure to New Yorkers. He started the Guardian Angels group in the high crime 1980s. He's been a ubiquitous figure in media in New York City for 4 decades now. But Sliwa's got a track record here. He was the Republican nominee 4 years ago, just like he's the Republican nominee now. He ran against Adams 4 years ago. How did he do? He got 28% of the vote. He lost to Eric Adams by more than 40 points. So Adams and Cuomo are looking at Sliwa and saying Republicans, they almost never win in New York City. And this guy already tried and got trounced. So why would I, Andrew Cuomo, why would I, Eric Adams, defer to Curtis Sliwa? That's it. Each one of them brings a chunk of support into this general election, but none of them with a big, broad enough coalition and a accomplished enough track record to make the other say, I'll back off, you take a shot at it. And as long as that dynamic persists, Gabe, the winner in this situation is the Democratic nominee, Zohran Mamdani.
Never a dull day in New York City politics. Steve Kornacki, thank you.
Got it.
And joining me now is our panel, Shelby Talcott, White House correspondent for Semaphore, Democratic strategist Naveen Nayak, and former Republican congressman from Florida, Carlos Curbelo. He's also an NBC News political analyst. Now, Shelby, I want to start with you. Cuomo conceded the primary after losing to Mamdani, but is there a level of arrogance here for him to come back here and think he can win over New Yorkers now?
I mean, that's a good question. I think there's no question. I think everyone has said that he ran a poor campaign originally, so perhaps he thinks that he can come back and sort of run a better campaign and do things correctly. But I also think that his strategy really, as was just laid out, relies on everybody else dropping out. And I don't know if that's a particularly strong strategy in any state, especially New York, when you're considering how crowded the race is and how each candidate is probably thinking that they have the upper hand, and why would they drop out, as again was just laid out. That's not the strongest strategy against Mamdani, who has run a really grassroots campaign, who won because he was so effective, and he was so effective with the social media strategy. He was so effective at getting out on the ground and talking to voters. That's hard to overcome.
Well, Naveen, I asked President Trump about this today. Let's listen to what he said.
Wow. Mr. President, your reaction to Andrew Cuomo staying in the New York City mayor's race. Andrew Cuomo staying in the New York City mayor's race.
I think he should stay. I think he has a shot.
Would you prefer him over...
Well, I don't want to say. You know, I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat or an independent. No, I think Andrew would have a good shot of winning.
What's your...
He's got to run a tough campaign.
What's your preference?
He's running against the communists. I would think that he would have a good shot of winning.
Now, if you're Andrew Cuomo, is that the last thing that you want to hear? And if you're Mamdani, on the flip side, is that the best thing that you can possibly hear? And we're just, seeing that according to his campaign, he's trying to make it seem that President Trump endorsed Andrew Cuomo. Technically, he didn't, but that's how the Mamdani campaign is looking at this.
Sure, it goes to the point that Cuomo's path here doesn't make any sense, even if the other candidates get out of there. Like, Mamdani got more votes in a Democratic primary than anyone ever in the history of New York. I think there's a lot more Democrats who would be very comfortable voting for someone whose only priority is affordability and the cost of living in New York. And Cuomo seems to be playing for a very small slice. I mean, honestly, the Wall Street and like the few people who live around there and work there.
To that point, you know, Carlos, in New York City, are there enough Democratic votes to go around here with 3 candidates in the race? Or can Cuomo actually siphon off moderate Republicans here from Wall Street?
Look, going back to that Trump quote, depending on how this shakes out, maybe that's good for him, right? You have to imagine that every Republican, there aren't very many in New York City, but that every Republican's top priority there has to be to prevent Mamdani from winning, right? So perhaps this ends up helping Andrew Cuomo. It helps him cement his coalition, and he can make the case that he's the one that should have that opportunity to go one-on-one. It's kind of like a ranked choice voting process before the election.
I think the only thing I'd say that's different, though, is that I actually think that even those moderate, they voted for Donald Trump. We saw, right, New York was one of the states that swung the most. It was because of affordability. It was because of the things Mamdani is talking about. Now, you might not agree with all his policies and that. I wish we had another Democrat who had a credible plan on affordability as opposed to a flawed candidate.
Can you really make that argument, the affordability argument?
I mean, I think that the thing that's in his favor in terms of talking about moderate Republicans is Mamdani has very progressive arguments as to how to solve the affordability crisis. I don't think that that's going to resonate with a lot of moderate Republicans. So in that sense, maybe there is a lane for Andrew Cuomo to say, okay, I have thoughts on affordability, but my answers are going to be a little bit more towards the center than Mamdani. And maybe that brings over moderate Republicans who understand that Donald Trump doesn't like the Republican nominee particularly that much.
Well, Shelby, in the clip that we played at the top of the segment, Cuomo essentially accused Mamdani of being all style, no substance, particularly when it comes to affordability. I want to read you something of what he told New York Magazine about that issue. He said that it's not about connecting with the perception of the problem. It's finding the real solution and then having the ability to do it. You don't want someone who just connects. That's step one. And what you really want is a problem solver, and I can actually do that. So what would he do on housing affordability? There is no real answer, he said.
Yeah, I
mean, what do you make of that
answer? This feels like something he should have probably come prepared with a better answer because you know that you're going to get asked this. That's not a good answer.
Right.
And it was an opportunity for Andrew Cuomo to really lay out his strategy, and maybe he will come back in a month or a few weeks and have a better strategy. But that's not a good start, I will say. And he did have an opportunity there to sort of hit Mamdani and the first part of his argument we've heard from Mamdani critics. We've heard the argument that he is sort of, laying out all these ideas that sound great in practice, but when you put it into practice are not going to work. But then you can't follow that up by saying, well, to be honest, we can't really do anything. I don't know how that gets any
And it furthers the idea that Cuomo's been this lazy candidate that hasn't really put the effort into the race.
Carlos, what did you make of the announcement video, the social media announcement video? I mean, Mamdani obviously very good at social media. Cuomo with this video. Does he risk coming across as inauthentic here?
Yeah, I thought, look, to borrow a Trump phrase, I thought it was low energy. I thought it wasn't compelling. It was basically, well, I'm not the other guy, right? Andrew Cuomo has to find his footing in this race, and it can't just be I'm not Mamdani. I'm for these more moderate solutions. Well, what are they? I don't really know. So they really have to take the race seriously if they want to get into that position where they can force the other two candidates out.
Well, I was going to say the thing it reveals is there's no rationale for why Andrew Cuomo wants to be mayor other than he wants to be in power again. Right. That is it. That is the rationale. He had to give up his control of power as governor, and he wants power again. And Mamdani, that is a very shallow critique. He has put out a lot of substance. You might not agree with the substance, but there are real policy proposals.
Does he risk doing a lot of long-term damage to the Democratic Party, Cuomo, because Mamdani's become this boogeyman for the right. Depending on some of the attacks, that if Cuomo goes after him about certain things, is he going to try to walk that fine line not to come across with all these Republican talking points, essentially? And this inter-party battle, is it good or bad for the Democratic Party?
I mean, my take on this, on the first hand, is that I think Andrew Cuomo cares about himself. He's not in this for the Democratic Party. He lost the Democratic primary. The traditional path would have been to endorse the Democrat and move forward. And, I'm heartened by, if this were, the Wisconsin Senate race, Democrats have avoided these kinds of fracturing in ways that Republicans have struggled to actually unify. And so it's New York mayor. But I do think he'll bring more attention to the race. Right. He'll bring more attention to Mamdani. Right. There's no doubt.
Well, Shelby, I want to end with you since we're running low on time, but I do quickly want to expand our window from New York Democrats to the National Party. And I want to mention what former President Obama told the fundraiser on Friday. He said, this message. He said, I think it's going to require a little bit less navel-gazing and a little less whining and being in fetal positions. It's going to require Democrats to just toughen up. This is referring to how they should fight Donald Trump. It is tough talk. Are Democrats ready to hear this?
I think it's to be determined. That is what voters have been asking in many ways. They looked at sort of the Republican Party because, say what you will about Donald Trump, one thing he does is he is aggressive. He fights back. He is not afraid to sort of maybe cross that line a little bit in some ways. Voters seem to like that. And I think the Democratic Party realized that they needed to be almost more like the Republican Party has been in terms of fighting. The problem is there's different strategies. There's still no real sort of leader. And so who knows, honestly.
Shelby, Naveen, and Carlos, thank you all for joining me here on the panel. We really appreciate it. And up next, we're live on Capitol Hill, where former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz was grilled by Senate Democrats today over the leaking of sensitive military plans in an unsecured group chat he created. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. President Trump's former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz faced senators today at his confirmation hearing to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. It is the first time Waltz has faced lawmakers since he was ousted from the White House after he mistakenly added a journalist to a Signal group chat earlier this year to discuss sensitive U.S. military plans to strike Houthi targets in Yemen. Despite that, it took more than an hour for any senator to press Waltz on the fallout. Here's some of what he said.
The use of Signal is not only as an encrypted app, is not only authorized, it was recommended in Biden's, the Biden-era CISA guidance.
The question I asked was, were you investigated for this expansion of the Signal group to include a journalist?
The White House conducted an investigation, and my understanding is the Department of Defense is still conducting an investigation.
And joining me now is NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. Ryan, thank you for joining us here. There were some questions about the Signal chant controversy, as we pointed out, but it didn't appear to be the main line of questioning. So was that a deliberate strategy by Democrats?
I think what you see play out in these hearings often, Gabe, is that Democrats kind of divide and conquer. There was an issue here that while they certainly wanted to ask questions about the Signalgate controversy, they also wanted to ask questions about the UN ambassadorship and this important role that Waltz is set to take over. And they also were complicated by the fact that he wasn't the only witness today. There were two other witnesses who were going through the confirmation process as well. So you did see two senators in particular, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, who you just showed, and Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who really focused a lot of their opportunity to ask questions and attempting to pin Waltz down on some of these questions related to Signalgate. And what they came up with was basically a series of talking points, retreating to many of the same things that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, and they left pretty much empty-handed trying to get to the bottom of how this all came to be.
So it sounds like we didn't learn a whole lot about it, but there was also a lot of mention of the UN's position towards the Israel-Hamas war and the role of UNRWA. What did we hear from the former National Security Advisor about that?
Well, it seems very clear that he is going to extend the same level of support to Israel that the current administration has. And when it comes to the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, that the U.S. is going to side with Israel. And the U.S. has really been a defender of Israel in the United Nations when Security Council resolutions come up condemning some of the violence there, accusing Israel, for instance, of war crimes. The U.S. has never supported resolutions in that vein. Mike Walts made it very clear that that would continue with him in the ambassadorship, regardless of how this process plays itself out and the direction the UN takes in the years to come.
And Ryan, before I let you go, you also have some other reporting about Congressman Comer, who's leading the investigation into President Biden's mental acuity and his use of an auto pen. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're on a hard wrap, and that's a complicated story, so I suggest go to NBCNews.com to read it. But essentially, James Comer accusing the former administration, of using an auto pen to sign sensitive documents. Comer himself using a digital signature to sign many of the interview requests that he's had for the people that are part of that investigation. As I said, we've got it all on NBCNews.com, Gabe.
Complicated story. Thank you very much, Ryan Nobles. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and thank you for listening to the control room and giving us a hard wrap. I'm Gabe Gutierrez. We're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now, but the news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.